The cold, metal walls of the secret government building I guarded every night seemed to hold secrets darker than the moonless sky outside. My name is Ian Freud, and I work the graveyard shift as a security guard at a facility known only to a select few. We don't talk about what goes on inside, not even amongst ourselves. The consequences of a loose tongue could be severe both legally and personally. The spirits confined within these walls ensured we knew the price of betrayal. The building stood on a desolate patch of land, surrounded by a high, electrified fence that hummed ominously. No one could enter or leave without clearance, and even those of us who worked here never truly felt free. The facility housed paranormal artifacts, objects imbued with a dark history, each one possessing a malevolent spirit. Most nights were uneventful, but there were times when the entities would escape their containment, bringing horror and chaos. I still remember the night when I witnessed the true nature of the place. It started like any other shift. I arrived at 11 p.m., exchanging a terse nod with the guard I was relieving. His eyes were haunted, his face gaunt, another reminder that this job was slowly eating us alive. The air inside the building was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and something more sinister that I could never quite place. I made my rounds, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the darkness as I checked each of the artifact rooms. Each room had reinforced glass cases containing objects that seemed mundane at first glance: an old mirror, a rusty knife, a weathered doll, but I knew better. These items were cursed, their spirits seething with a hatred that permeated the air. By 2 a.m., the building was deathly silent. My footsteps echoed through the empty halls as I walked towards the control room. That's when I heard the soft, whispering voice. It was a woman's voice, sweet yet tinged with malice. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hand. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice echoing back to me. The whispering stopped, replaced by a suffocating silence. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves. This wasn't the first time I had heard voices, but this one felt different, more personal, more dangerous. I continued to the control room, my senses on high alert. The room was small, crammed with monitors showing live feeds from security cameras placed throughout the facility. I scanned the screens, looking for anything out of the ordinary. That's when I saw her. On one of the monitors, in the room with the antique mirror, stood a woman in a long, tattered dress. Her hair was a tangled mess, obscuring her face. She was just standing there, staring at the mirror. My blood ran cold. There shouldn't have been anyone else in the building. I grabbed the radio, my voice shaking. "Control to all units. We have an intruder in room 7. Repeat, an intruder in room 7. Static. Then a chilling response. "You shouldn't have seen her." The voice wasn't from any of my colleagues. It was the same whispering voice I had heard earlier. Panic surged through me. I dropped the radio and ran towards room 7, my mind racing. The corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, each corner turning into a labyrinth of shadows. When I finally reached the room, it was empty. The woman was gone, but the mirror remained. I approached it cautiously, my reflection staring back at me with wide, fearful eyes. As I got closer, I saw something move behind me. I spun around, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there. A sudden chill enveloped me, and the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath fogged up in front of me. Then I heard the voice again, right behind me. "Help me. Bear." I turned to the mirror, and my heart nearly stopped. The woman was inside the mirror, her hands pressed against the glass, her eyes pleading. I stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. The room was plunged into darkness, save for the eerie glow emanating from the mirror. "Ian," she whispered, her voice filled with despair. "Help me." How did she know my name? Fear clawed at my throat, but a strange compulsion urged me to help her. I reached out towards the mirror, my hand trembling. As my fingers touched the glass, a searing pain shot through my arm, and I screamed. The mirror seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, and I felt a force trying to pull me in. I yanked my hand back, falling to the floor, gasping for breath. The woman's face twisted into a sinister smile, and her eyes glowed with a malevolent light. The room seemed to warp around me, the shadows growing darker, more oppressive. The next thing I knew, I was running. I fled the room, the woman's laughter echoing in my ears. The building seemed to come alive, the walls closing in on me. Doors slammed shut, lights flickered, and the whispering grew louder, more insistent. I could feel their eyes on me, the spirits, watching, waiting. I burst into the control room, slamming the door behind me and collapsing into the chair. My hand throbbed with pain, the skin around it burned and blistered. I glanced at the monitors, expecting to see the woman's face on every screen, but they were all blank. The entire surveillance system had shut down. For a moment I considered leaving, just running out of the building and never looking back. But I knew I couldn't. There were protocols to follow, and abandoning my post would only make things worse. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I needed to get a grip. I reached for the phone to call my supervisor, but the line was dead. I was completely cut off, alone, trapped. I sat there, the silence pressing in on me, my thoughts racing. What was I dealing with? Was this some kind of test? A sick joke? The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. I kept glancing at the door, expecting it to burst open at any moment. My mind replayed the woman's face, her pleading eyes, her sinister smile. What did she want from me? Why had she singled me out? Then, the lights went out. The entire building was plunged into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, but it was gone, left behind in room 7. I was alone, in the dark, with whatever horrors the building contained. I heard the whispering again, closer this time. The air grew colder, and I could feel their present, spirits, ghosts, whatever they were, closing in on me. My breath came in shallow gasps, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to move, to find a way out, but my legs felt like lead. A cold hand touched my shoulder and I screamed, jumping up and spinning around. There was no one there, just the darkness and the whispering, growing louder, more frantic. "You can't leave," the voice hissed. "You're one of us now." I backed away, my mind reeling. One of them? What did that mean? I stumbled towards the door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the handle. It wouldn't budge. I was trapped. Panic set in, and I pounded on the door, shouting for help. But no one came. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, and I felt a pressure building in my head, like a vice tightening around my skull. Then I saw her. The woman from the mirror, standing in the corner of the room, her eyes glowing with a malevolent light. She stepped towards me, her movements slow and deliberate. "You can't escape," she whispered. "You belong to us." I backed away, my mind racing. There had to be a way out. I couldn't let them take me. I wouldn't. Summoning every ounce of courage, I lunged for the control panel, hitting the emergency override. The alarms blared to life, the lights flickering back on. The woman screamed, a sound that pierced through me like a knife, and then she was gone. The whispering ceased, replaced by the blaring sirens and flashing red lights. The door finally gave way, and I stumbled out into the hallway, the alarms echoing through the building. I ran, not looking back, my only thought to get out, to escape the nightmare. When I burst through the front doors and into the cold night air, I collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. The building loomed behind me, a dark silhouette against the starless sky. The alarms had stopped, the lights returning to their normal, eerie glow. I sat there, shaking, my mind racing with everything I had seen and heard. The woman's voice, her face, the whispering, it all played over and over in my head. What had I gotten myself into? What was this place? Hours later, when the day shift arrived, they found me sitting there, still in shock. They took me inside, gave me water, tried to calm me down. But nothing could erase what I had experienced. As the sun rose, casting a pale light over the facility, I found myself standing at the edge of the property, looking back at the building. I knew I should walk away, leave and never return. But something held me back. Curiosity? Fear? A sense of duty? I didn't know. All I knew was that my life had changed forever. The horrors I had witnessed, the spirits I had encountered, they were now a part of me, a dark shadow that would haunt my every step. I still had a choice to make. Return to the building and face the terror once more, or walk away and try to forget. But deep down I knew the answer. The secrets of that place, the mysteries it held, they called to me. And despite the fear, despite the danger, I knew I couldn't turn my back on it. As I stood there contemplating my fate, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the ground. The building loomed before me, silent and foreboding, a dark promise of things to come. And with a heavy heart, I knew what I had to do. As I stood at the edge of the property, the chill of the morning air biting into my skin, the weight of my decision pressed heavily on my shoulders. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away, to never look back at the building that had already claimed so many lives and shattered so many lives. But the pull was undeniable, a dark allure that whispered promises of answers and understanding. The following days were a blur. I found myself unable to shake the images from that night, the woman in the mirror, the whispering voices, the cold, suffocating presence of the spirits. Sleep offered no refuge. My dreams were haunted by their faces, their voices calling out to me, begging for release or mocking my fear. I avoided the building during the day, wandering aimlessly through the town, trying to find solace in the mundane routine of everyday life. But nothing felt real anymore. The world outside seemed pale and insubstantial compared to the visceral terror of the facility. A week later, I received a call from my supervisor, a man named Richards. His voice was as cold and detached as ever, but there was an undercurrent of urgency. "Ian, we need you back. We've had another incident." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Another incident. Another life claimed by the horrors within those walls. I wanted to refuse, to tell him I was done, but something stopped me. The same compulsion that had driven me to that mirror, the same need for answers. "I'll be there," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. That night I stood before the building once more, the electric hum of the fence a familiar, ominous presence. The facility seemed to loom larger, its shadows deeper, its secrets darker. As I walked through the entrance, the cold air inside felt like a physical force, pressing against my skin, seeping into my bones. Richards met me in the control room. His usually stern face looked even more haggard, lines of worry etched deeply into his features. He handed me a file, his hand trembling slightly. "Another guard went missing last night," he said, his voice flat. "We found his radio and flashlight outside room 7. Room 7. The very room where I had encountered the woman in the mirror. My stomach churned, a cold knot of fear tightening inside me. I opened the file, scanning the report. The guard's name was David Thompson. He had been with us for only a few weeks. I barely knew him, but the thought of what he might have experienced filled me with dread. "Ian," Richards said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I need you to find out what happened. We need to contain this before it gets worse." I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of the task ahead was almost too much to bear, but I knew I couldn't refuse. Not now, not after everything I had seen. The corridors were eerily silent as I made my way to room 7, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. My heart pounded in my chest, each step echoing loudly in the empty hall. The door to room 7 was ajar, a faint light spilling out into the hallway. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and pushed the door open. The room was just as I remembered it. The mirror stood in its place, its surface reflecting the dim light from the hallway. But there was something different. A feeling of wrongness that permeated the air. I approached the mirror cautiously, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of Thompson. Then I saw it. A smear of blood on the floor, leading to the mirror. My heart raced as I followed the trail, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The blood led directly to the mirror, and as I stared at my reflection, I saw her again. The woman. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and malice. "You can't save him," she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. "He's mine now." Rage and fear surged through me, a potent mix that drove me to act. I reached out, my hand pressing against the cold surface of the mirror. Pain shot through me, but I didn't pull back. Instead, I pushed harder, the glass seeming to give way beneath my touch. Suddenly, I was no longer in the room. The world around me shifted, the darkness deepening, becoming almost tangible. I found myself in a place that felt both familiar and alien, a twisted reflection of the facility, bathed in shadows and filled with the echoing whispers of the damned. The woman stood before me, her tattered dress fluttering as if caught in an unseen breeze. Her eyes bore into mine, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice softer now, almost gentle. "I'm here to save him," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me, "and to end this." She laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You think you can end this? You think you can save anyone?" Her form began to shift, her features becoming more grotesque, more demonic. The air around us crackled with dark energy, and I felt a force pulling at me, trying to drag me down into the depths of this twisted reality. But I refused to give in. Summoning every ounce of strength, I focused on the image of Thompson, the need to save him driving me forward. I reached out, my hand grasping at the shadows, searching for any sign of him. And then I saw him. He was lying on the ground, his body broken and bloody, but he was alive. Barely. I rushed to his side, my heart pounding with a mixture of relief and fear. "David," I whispered, shaking him gently. "We need to get out of here." His eyes fluttered open, a flicker of recognition crossing his features. He tried to speak, but his voice was a mere croak. I helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as we moved towards the spot where I had entered this nightmarish realm. The woman, no. The demon blocked our path, her eyes glowing with hatred. "You won't leave," she hissed. "You belong to me now." I steeled myself, my grip tightening on Thompson. "No," I said firmly. "We belong to the living." With a surge of determination, I pushed past her, the force of my will cutting through the darkness. The world around us seemed to warp and twist, but I didn't stop. I focused on the light, on the way back to reality. And then, with a blinding flash, we were back. The mirror shattered, the pieces falling to the ground in a cascade of glass. I collapsed, Thompson beside me, both of us gasping for breath. Richards and the other guards found us there, their faces a mix of shock and relief. They helped us up, their questions a distant buzz in my ears. All I could think about was the woman, the demon, and the knowledge that the fight was far from over. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself back at the edge of the property, the decision looming before me once more. The facility had been quiet since that night, but I knew it was only a matter of time before the darkness returned. The pull was still there, a constant whisper at the back of my mind. I had faced the horrors within those walls and survived, but the scars ran deep. The question remained, should I go back? Should I continue to fight the darkness, to protect the world from the evil that lurked within the facility? As the sun set, casting long shadows across the ground, I made my decision. The battle was not over, and I could not walk away. The secrets of the building, the spirits that haunted it, they were now a part of me. And I would face them, no matter the cost. With a heavy heart and a determined spirit, I turned back to the building, ready to confront the darkness once more. The night was long, and the shadows deep, but I knew one thing for certain: I would not face them alone. The nights that followed my decision to return to the facility were filled with an uneasy silence. The once familiar corridors now seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and every shadow felt like it was watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite the fear, I knew I couldn't turn back. I had made a promise to myself and to the others who had fallen victim to the horrors within these walls. I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I resumed my nightly rounds, always on edge, my senses heightened to any change in the atmosphere. The spirits remained quiet for a while, perhaps recuperating or planning their next move. Each night felt like a waiting game, the tension building as I anticipated the inevitable. One particularly cold night, the unease in the air was palpable. The facility felt different, as if it were holding its breath. I made my way to the control room, the weight of the night pressing down on me. As I reviewed the surveillance footage, a flicker of movement on one of the monitors caught my eye. It was in the artifact room that housed a seemingly innocuous object, a small, antique music box. I zoomed in on the feed, my heart pounding as I watched the lid of the music box slowly open on its own. A haunting melody began to play, the sound distorted and otherworldly. The air around me grew colder, and I felt a presence, something ancient and powerful, emanating from the screen. A shadowy figure began to take shape next to the music box, its form barely distinguishable in the dim light. I knew I had to act quickly. I grabbed my flashlight and headed towards the artifact room, my mind racing with possibilities. What was this new entity? And what did it want? As I approached the room, the melody grew louder, echoing through the halls. The door was ajar, and I could see the faint glow of the music box from inside. Steeling myself, I pushed the door open and stepped into the room. The figure was there, standing over the music box, its features obscured by darkness. Its presence was overwhelming, a palpable force that seemed to press down on me. I raised my flashlight, the beam cutting through the shadows, revealing a gaunt, skeletal face with hollow eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. "You should not have come," the figure whispered, its voice a chilling echo that seemed to reverberate through my entire being. I felt a surge of fear but forced myself to remain steady. "Who are you? What do you want?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, it moved closer to the music box, its skeletal fingers tracing the edge of the lid. "This box holds a piece of my soul," it finally said, its voice filled with a mixture of sorrow and anger. "I am bound to it, trapped by those who sought to control forces beyond their understanding." I took a cautious step forward, my mind racing. "Is there a way to free you? To end this?" I asked, my curiosity mingling with fear. The figure's hollow eyes seemed to pierce through me, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of hope. "There is a way," it whispered, "but it comes at a great cost. You must be willing to sacrifice." Before I could respond, the room grew colder, and the figure began to fade. The melody from the music box slowed, its haunting notes trailing off into silence. I knew I had to act quickly if I was to uncover the truth and put an end to the horrors within the facility. I spent the next few days researching the music box, delving into the archives and piecing together its dark history. It had been acquired decades ago, along with other cursed artifacts, by a group of researchers who believed they could harness the power of the supernatural. Their experiments had gone horribly wrong, resulting in the deaths of many and the entrapment of spirits like the one I had encountered. The more I learned, the more I realized the enormity of the task ahead. To free the spirits and end the cycle of terror, I would have to destroy the artifacts and release the trapped souls. But the spirits were bound to the objects in a way that defied conventional understanding. Destroying the artifacts could have unforeseen consequences, and the risk was immense. One night, as I pored over the files in the dim light of my office, a soft knock on the door startled me. I looked up to see Richard standing there, his expression grave. "Ian, I need to talk to you," he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "I know what you're planning, and I have to warn you, it's not that simple." I frowned, setting aside the documents. "What do you mean? We have to free the spirits. It's the only way to end this." Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been here longer than anyone, and I've seen things that would drive most people mad. The artifacts are not just cursed, they're connected to something much larger, something we don't fully understand. Destroying them could unleash even greater horrors." His words sent a chill down my spine. "Then what do? We can't just let this continue." Richards leaned forward, his eyes intense. "There may be another way. I've heard rumors of a ritual one that could sever the connection between the spirits and the artifacts without destroying them. But it's dangerous, and it requires a powerful medium." I felt a surge of hope mixed with apprehension. "Where do we find this medium?" Richards hesitated. "There is an old woman, a shaman, who lives on the outskirts of town. She's said to have knowledge of the occult and the power to perform the ritual, but she's reclusive and distrustful of outsiders. It won't be easy to convince her to help." Despite the risks, I knew we had to try. The alternative was unthinkable. "Let's find her," I said, determination in my voice. The following evening, Richards and I set out to find the shaman. The journey took us to the edge of town, to a small, dilapidated house surrounded by dense woods. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and an eerie silence hung over the place. We approached the house cautiously, and Richards knocked on the door. After a long moment, it creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with piercing eyes that seemed to look straight through us. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice rough and wary. Richard stepped forward, his tone respectful. "We seek your help. There is a facility not far from here that houses cursed artifacts. We need to perform a ritual to free the spirits trapped within them." The shaman's eyes narrowed. "And why should I help you? Those who meddle with such forces often bring disaster upon themselves." I stepped forward, desperation in my voice. "Please, we have no other choice. The spirits are suffering, and people are dying. We need to end this." For a long moment, the shaman studied us in silence. Then she sighed, stepping aside to let us in. "Very well. But know this: once the ritual begins, there is no turning back. You must be prepared for whatever comes. Inside, the house was filled with strange artifacts and symbols, a testament to the shaman's deep connection to the supernatural. She led us to a small room, dimly lit by candles, and began to prepare for the ritual. As she chanted in a language I didn't understand, I felt a palpable shift in the air. The temperature dropped, and a sense of foreboding filled the room. The shaman turned to us, her eyes glowing with an inner light. "Place the artifacts here," she instructed, motioning to a circle drawn on the floor, "and be ready to face the darkness." We placed the cursed objects in the circle, and the shaman began the ritual in earnest. The air crackled with energy, and the room seemed to close in on us. Shadows danced on the walls, and I felt the presence of the spirits, watching, waiting. As the shaman's chanting reached a crescendo, the artifacts began to vibrate, a dark light emanating from them. The spirits' faces appeared, twisted in anguish, their voices a cacophony of pain and fury. "Hold fast," the shaman shouted over the noise. "The ritual is almost complete." But the spirits were not going to let go easily. They surged towards us, their forms shifting and writhing, trying to break free from the circle. I felt a searing pain in my chest, as if my very soul was being torn apart. With a final, desperate effort, the shaman raised her hands, a blinding light erupting from the circle. The spirits screamed, their forms dissolving into the light, and then there was silence. The room was still, the air heavy with the aftermath of the ritual. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, my body trembling. Richards knelt beside me, his face pale but relieved. "It's over," he said softly. "We've done it." The shaman looked at us, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. "You have freed the spirits, but remember there are always consequences. The darkness may be gone, but it will never be forgotten." As we left the shaman's house, the weight of her words lingered. The facility was finally free of the malevolent spirits, but the memory of their suffering and the horrors we had faced would stay with us forever. Back at the facility, the atmosphere was noticeably lighter, the oppressive presence of the spirits gone. But the scars remained, a reminder of the darkness that had once lurked within these walls. I stood at the edge of the property, looking out at the dawn breaking over the horizon. The decision to return had cost me dearly, but it had also given me a sense of purpose. The battle against the darkness was never truly over, but for now, we had won a small victory. And as the first rays of sunlight pierced the morning mist, I knew that I would continue to guard this place, to protect it from whatever horrors might come. Because in the end, we are all bound by the choices we make and the shadows we face.